Now we have some breaking news from Manchester Crown Court. Let's go live now to Rowan Bridge.
Yes, I can tell you that the judge in the case of the Brianna Ghey sentencing has lifted the order relating to the naming of the two children involved in the case. They are both 16 years old. Up until now, they have been known as Girl X and Boy Y for legal reasons, but we can now tell you their real names, which are Eddie Ratcliffe, who is 16 and from Lee, and Scarlett Jenkinson, who is also now 16 and from Cheshire. They were convicted in December of murdering Brianna Ghey almost exactly a year ago. The media had made an application for their names to be brought out into the public domain, and the judge, Mrs. Justice Yip, has just lifted that order this morning. We are now awaiting the sentencing of these two teenagers for the murder of Brianna Ghey. She was attacked in Linear Park in Cheshire in February last year. The two teenagers, Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, were convicted in December of her murder. She died after being stabbed 28 times in what was described as a ferocious and frenzied attack. We are going to hear statements this morning from members of Brianna Ghey's family talking about the impact that her death has had on them, and then we will get the sentencing from Justice Yip. She has already told the two that they will be given life sentences, but what we will hear today is how long they will have to serve in prison as a minimum term before they will be potentially eligible for parole.
Rowan, just stay with us. So this is just some breaking news at the moment, which is that the two children who were found guilty of murdering Brianna Ghey have now been named as Eddie Ratcliffe and Scarlett Jenkinson. Rowan, what are we expecting to hear from the courts? Because the sentencing is meant to be today as well.
Yes, the sentencing will take place at some point today. The process will be that we will hear victim personal statements from family members of Brianna Ghey. We expect to hear from her mother and from other family members who will talk about Brianna as they remembered her and the impact that her death has had on them. It's their chance really to have their moment in court and to say what they want the judge to hear in terms of the impact that this has had on them. We will then expect to hear some legal argument, probably from the legal representatives of the two people convicted of a murder, who will offer probably some sort of mitigation or their views in terms of how long the sentencing should be, how long they should have to serve in jail. We then expect there will be a brief gap while Justice Yip will go away to consider her sentence, and then she will come back and there will be a televised sentencing where Mrs. Justice Yip will appear on camera. We will be able to bring that to you on the news channel, and she will deliver her sentence for these two teenagers for the murder of Brianna Ghey. They will be given life sentences, but the key part will be the minimum term that they are given, how long they have to stay in jail for before they are potentially eligible for parole.
And Rowan, just remind us of what Scarlett and Eddie were found guilty of, because this was a crime that shocked the country.
Yes, I mean, Cheshire Police described it as one of the most difficult cases they dealt with. This was the murder of a school child by two 15-year-old children, younger than their actual victim themselves. And this was something that had been pre-planned in court. There was evidence about how the two teenagers had drawn up what they called a kill list with 5 children's names on it, including Brianna Ghey's, their eventual victim. They then lured her to Linear Park in Cheshire on a Saturday afternoon in a pre-planned attack, and she was then stabbed multiple times. But during the hearing, the court heard how the girl in the case, Scarlett, had a sort of fascination with murder and death, how she had downloaded a web browser to allow her to search the dark web, the part of the internet that's not indexed by search engines, looking for material around torture and murder, and how she had a fascination with serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer and Harold Shipman. That police described her as having a thirst for murder. That culminated in this pre-planned attack on Brianna Ghey, which happened on a Saturday afternoon in broad daylight on February the 11th last year. The two teenagers were arrested that same weekend and faced trial in December. There was a trial that lasted several weeks, but it took the jury less than 5 hours to return guilty verdicts of murder on both the subjects in this trial.
And what more can you tell us about Scarlett Jenkinson and Eddie Ratcliffe, because they appeared in court throughout the trial?
They did. Eddie Ratcliffe is they've both been diagnosed with traits of autism. Eddie Ratcliffe, in fact, during the trial, stopped speaking to anybody other than his mother, and when he was giving evidence, he did via a keyboard with a support worker who then read out what he was saying. He has stopped speaking to anybody other than his mother. Scarlett Jenkinson, the court heard how she had got a sort of fascination with death and murder, how she had searched the dark web for details around torture and murder and death, and how she had become somewhat obsessed with Brianna Ghey and had planned how the two of them would attack her using a knife. It was later discovered that at Eddie's house he had a bloody jacket and shoes which he'd kept, and the knife which the police believe was actually used to attack Brianna Ghey. When they were both found guilty, neither of them showed any emotion in court. They're both in court here today with members of their family, and Brianna's family are here today as well, and they will hear later today how long they will serve in jail for Brianna's murder.
Just tell us a bit more about Brianna's family, because obviously we've heard testaments and statements, especially from Brianna's mother, about the impact of her daughter's death and of this case.
Yes, it was interesting. Brianna Ghey's mother, Esther, actually said that she has a great deal of sympathy for the families of the two killers in this case, saying that they, in fact, in some ways have lost children as a result of this as well. She said that at the start of the case, she started off having some sympathy for the murderers of her child, that maybe this was something that had got out of control. But she said as the case went on and they showed absolutely no remorse for what had happened, that she lost all sympathy for them. But she said that she wanted to remember her daughter. She described her as fearless and funny. She identified as transgender, and said her daughter was happy to dress in female school clothing, and she just did that and went to school as a female, and she was very proud of her daughter. But Brianna Ghey was a complex character. She also suffered from anxiety. During the court case, we heard how when she was getting the bus to Linear Park to meet the people who would eventually murder her, she texted her mother saying how scared she was. So despite the fact that she was on the one hand funny and fearless, had 30,000 followers on social media, she also suffered from anxiety and found social contact difficult in certain circumstances.